There are stories whispered in marble corridors, stories too dangerous to write and too powerful to kill. Some begin with a birth, others begin with a death. But this one begins with a crash. The kind that rips apart not only metal and bone, but centuries of royal silence. Before we begin, remember to subscribe to History 1, your gateway into the darkest chambers of the past, where truth is a flickering candle and secrets have teeth. Now, let me take you to Europe. Not the Europe on travel brochures, but the old one, the Europe of dynasties, of velvet-lined conspiracies, of royal houses whose bloodlines shaped borders, and buried scandals beneath tapestries and treaties. At the heart of this story stands the House of Valmont, one of the most influential aristocratic families in old Europe. They were wealthy enough to loan money to kings, powerful enough to dictate marriages across continents, and secretive enough to hide a scandal so shocking that it would remain sealed for decades. The scandal begins, or ends, with Princess Evelyn Valmont, a woman adored by the public but plagued by private shadows. She was known for her humanitarian work, her defiance of rigid aristocratic rules, her deep compassion. Yet she carried a loneliness no photograph could capture. On the evening of September 3rd, 1997, Evelyn's sapphire blue sedan skidded off the rain-slick road near the old Saint-Michel viaduct. The crash was instantaneous. Newspapers blamed driver fatigue, speed, weather. Official statements called it a tragic accident. A nation mourned. But inside locked rooms, among the ultra-elite, a different story hissed through the cracks. Because Evelyn was not alone. Someone else was in the car. Someone who vanished from the official records. Someone the Valmont family had spent 23 years hiding. Whispers say it was her lover. Others claim it was a blackmailer. But recently, hidden documents, sealed letters, and a coded diary discovered in the Valmont estate tell a darker, far more dangerous truth. They reveal that Evelyn had a third child, a child the world never knew existed, a child whose existence threatened to tear Europe's most powerful aristocratic network apart. And on that rainy September night, Princess Evelyn was on her way to reveal the truth, publicly. It was to be her greatest act of rebellion, a blow to the tradition she despised. But that truth never reached the light. Because someone made sure she didn't survive the journey. The letters imply the fatal crash wasn't an accident. It was a closure, an execution of silence, the termination of a revelation that could have shattered alliances, exposed illegitimate heirs, and rewritten aristocratic succession lines stretching back to the Napoleonic Wars. But the most chilling part, Evelyn's forbidden third child, survived the crash, and someone removed them from the wreckage before rescue teams arrived. Who took the child? Why did the Valmonts hide them? And how many lives were sacrificed to bury the truth? In the next parts, we will journey deep into aristocratic archives, secret correspondence, and political alliances that shaped the fate of Europe, to uncover the origin of the forbidden child, the cause of Evelyn's rebellion, and the deadly chain of events that ended with the crash at Saint-Michel. The truth begins much earlier than the night of the accident. It begins in 1972, inside the Valmont Palace, behind a locked door. To understand why Princess Evelyn's third child was considered dangerous enough to erase, we must travel back to 1972, a year of quiet political shifts and louder private betrayals. The Valmont Palace, perched on a limestone cliff overlooking the river Heir, stood as an immovable fortress of tradition. Behind its gilded gates, lineage was law, and bloodlines were sacred currency. The House of Valmont had survived wars, revolutions, and assassinations by mastering a single art: control. Control of marriages, alliances, information, and most importantly, reputation. Anything that could tarnish the dynasty was swiftly, silently removed. It was within this environment that young Evelyn Valmont grew up, intelligent, elegant, but restless beneath the weight of her family's expectations. She was the second daughter of Duke Henri Valmont, a man whose sense of duty was carved from the same stone as the palace walls. Her mother, Duchess Anneliese, belonged to the old Bavarian nobility, bred to embody the quiet obedience expected of aristocratic wives. Evelyn was different. Even as a teenager, she questioned the arranged harmony of royal life. She wandered through the palace archives, reading banned letters and old correspondences, hungry for truth rather than tradition. The servants whispered she was too curious, a trait the Valmonts historically punished. Everything changed during the summer of Evelyn's 19th year. That was when Captain Marcus Leclerc arrived. Marcus wasn't of noble blood. He came from a respected but ordinary military family in southern France. He had been invited to the palace only because Duke Henri wanted a trusted officer to supervise Evelyn's equestrian training. But the moment Evelyn saw him, tall, sun-browned from field training, with a quiet confidence that defied aristocratic arrogance, something shifted in her. For the first time, someone looked at Evelyn not as a future duchess or political pawn, but as a woman. What began as formal lessons quickly evolved into secret conversations, then stolen moments, then something neither of them could stop. The palace gardens became their sanctuary. A hidden chamber behind the library became their refuge, and by autumn, Evelyn and Marcus were entangled in a forbidden romance that violated every law of the Valmont lineage. When Evelyn discovered she was pregnant, she didn't panic. She felt free. She imagined breaking away from the dynasty, rejecting the cold alliances her parents planned for her. She wanted to raise the child in a world untouched by noble politics. Marcus wanted the same. They planned to leave, to disappear to the countryside away from the Valmont shadow, but secrets do not live long in royal palaces. It was Duchess Annalise who found the letter first, a small note Evelyn hid inside a book, describing their plan to flee. Annalise, torn between maternal instinct and dynastic duty, made the choice the Valmonts always made. She told her husband. The consequences were swift, brutal, unforgiving. Marcus Leclerc was dismissed from his military post, stripped of honours, and declared a destabilising influence on the royal household. But the truth was darker. Marcus vanished on his journey home. No one ever saw him again. Evelyn was confined to her private chambers for the remainder of her pregnancy. The family announced she had fallen ill. Officially, no child was ever expected. Unofficially, strict preparations were put in place. Midwives sworn to silence, servants threatened, and all windows covered. When Evelyn gave birth on March 14, 1973, the palace archivist recorded nothing. The child, a healthy infant with dark hair like Marcus, was immediately removed. Duke Henry declared, "This birth never happened. The Valmont line will not be diluted." Evelyn's screams echoed through the stone corridors. The child, unnamed, unregistered, and unacknowledged, disappeared into the vast network of aristocratic secrecy, taken by someone the family trusted. And Evelyn? Something inside her broke that day. She became colder, quieter, but also more determined. She would find her child again. She swore it. Decades later, her search, and the truth she uncovered, would place her on that rain-slick road towards Saint-Michel, where someone else waited to silence her forever. But before Evelyn ever stepped into that car, the child's life took a dangerous turn, because the House of Valmont's reach did not end at the palace walls. It reached into orphanages, private estates, and the shadowed corners of other noble houses with secrets of their own. The child taken from Evelyn Valmont in 1973 did not vanish into thin air, though for decades it seemed as though they had slipped through the cracks of history itself. But in truth, the child became part of a much older, darker system within European aristocracy, the quiet relocation of inconvenient heirs. This practice, whispered about among old royal circles, operated like a ghost network, unofficial, undocumented, but ruthlessly efficient. Its purpose was simple: to preserve the purity of noble bloodlines while avoiding scandal. Sometimes the children were placed in distant relatives' households under false identities. Sometimes they were tucked into well-funded orphanages reserved only for special cases. And sometimes they were hidden in plain sight. The Valmont child fell into the second category. 3 weeks after the birth, under the cover of a moonless night, a black carriage left Valmont Palace and wound its way to the monastery of Saint Lucien, a secluded stone complex carved into a mountain pass near the Belgian border. The monastery, known for taking in orphans of elite patronage, was funded by families who wanted moral appearances upheld, while keeping their secrets buried. The child was placed into the care of the monks with a short, chilling directive. The child is to have no name, no papers, no lineage. Raise them until arrangements are made. Arrangements. That was the word the nobility used when deciding where a scandal should be buried. Years passed. The child, later given the name Marcel by the monks though he never knew why, grew up surrounded by heavy rituals, old books and stone silence. The monks were kind but distant. Marcel always sensed that something in his life didn't add up. While other children arrived with blankets, mementos, or at least a birth date, Marcel had nothing. No early records, no family visits, no explanation for why wealthy benefactors sent annual donations specifically earmarked for his care. By the time he was 10, Marcel had begun asking questions. By 12, he had memorized every face who visited the monastery, especially the ones who arrived in expensive coats, carrying the faint scent of cigar smoke and power. One of them stood out, Lord Auguste Rivenhall, a distant cousin of the Valmont family and one of the aristocracy's most ruthless fixers. Rivenhall was an old man with a silver-tipped cane and eyes like polished stone. He visited twice a year, never speaking to the children, always meeting in private with the abbot. Whenever he arrived, Marcel felt a strange tension in the air, as though something about him was directly connected to his forgotten past. He was right. When Marcel turned 13, everything shifted. A fire broke out in the upper dormitory, suspicious, sudden, and perfectly timed. None of the children were harmed, but the blaze destroyed decades of records stored in the abbey's archive room. Monks mourned the historical loss, but Marcel noticed something peculiar. The fire consumed only a specific set of documents, all stored in a single locked cabinet. Documents related to the special orphans. Documents related to him. Lord Rivenhall visited the very next morning. That night, Marcel overheard a conversation he was never meant to hear. Standing outside the abbot's door, he caught fragments. The girl has begun asking questions. Evelyn is relentless. We cannot allow any connection. The child must be relocated permanently, the abbot protested. This time his voice trembled with something close to fear. Lord Rivenhall, he is not a threat. He is only a boy. A beat of silence. Then Rivenhall's voice, cold, final. Every threat begins as a child. Marcel didn't understand the full meaning of those words, but he understood enough. He was the subject of the conversation. Someone powerful didn't want him found. Someone feared that his existence could unravel something enormous. 2 nights later, the monks woke Marcel before dawn and packed his few belongings into a small cloth sack. "You must leave, Marcel," the abbot whispered. "It's for your safety." "But why?" The abbot looked away, unable to explain. He placed a silver pendant into Marcel's hand, the only thing saved from the fire. Marcel had never seen it before. It bore a crest he did not recognize, but centuries of European nobility would have. The Valmont sigil, a swan with wings half spread. "Keep this hidden," the abbot warned, "and trust no one who carries the scent of old power." Marcel was delivered to a carriage headed north. He did not know it then, but Evelyn Valmont, his mother, was still searching for him, and the people responsible for separating them were preparing to erase the last trace of their connection. Marcel's relocation was carried out with the precision of an operation repeated many times before. He remembered little of the journey north, only the sharp smell of wet leather from the carriage seats, the distant roll of thunder, and the unnerving silence of the driver, who never spoke and never made eye contact. The deeper they travelled into the northern countryside, the more Marcel felt the world narrowing around him. By sunrise, the carriage stopped in front of an estate hidden behind towering beech trees. It was not a palace, but it carried the unmistakable imprint of aristocratic wealth. Wrought iron gates, windows framed in limestone, and gardens sculpted with mathematical precision. This was Rivenhall Manor, though Marcel wouldn't learn the name until years later. The front doors opened before he could even knock. A woman in her 50s greeted him, tall, stern, dressed not like a housekeeper, but like someone accustomed to command. "Welcome," she said softly. "Come inside, you'll be safe here." But safety was not what awaited him. Inside the manor, every room whispered secrets. Portraits of narrow-faced nobles stared down with cold judgment. Hallways branched in labyrinth-like patterns. Staff moved silently, speaking in hushed tones, always stopping when Marcel entered a room. He quickly sensed a strange contradiction. He was treated with meticulous care. Private lessons, tailored clothes, daily checkups, yet never allowed to leave the estate grounds. In the first month, he asked one of the maids why. Her answer was immediate, rehearsed. "Because the world outside is not safe for children like you." Children like you. The phrase lodged itself in his mind like a splinter. He soon realized the manor operated under a different kind of secrecy than the monastery. The monks hid him out of obligation. Rivenhall Manor hid him out of intention. It became clear when he met Lord Auguste Rivenhall face to face. The old man entered the study one afternoon, leaning on his silver-tipped cane. Marcel froze at the sight of him. The man from the Abbey, the one whose presence suffocated the air. Rivenhall studied him with an expression both analytical and burdened by history. "So," he began, "you are the boy." Marcel felt the need to ask, "Which boy?" Rivenhall's lips twitched, not a smile, something colder. "The one who was born by mistake." The words hit Marcel like a physical blow. He opened his mouth to speak, but Rivenhall raised a hand, silencing him. "You'll remain here until decisions are made. You have a roof over your head, food, education. That is more than most children receive. Ask for nothing more." Then he leaned close, his voice a whisper sharpened by decades of power. "And forget the pendant. It will only bring you trouble." Marcel instinctively clutched the hidden chain beneath his shirt. Rivenhall's eyes narrowed. "Throw it away." "I won't," Marcel said quietly. Rivenhall's gaze hardened, but he said nothing more. Instead, he turned sharply and left the room, leaning heavily on his cane. For the next several years, Marcel lived in a gilded cage. Lessons in languages, history, diplomacy and mathematics filled his days. His teachers were experts, some even professors from prestigious universities, yet none ever mentioned why a boy with no papers needed such an elite education. By the time he reached 16, Marcel could sense a deeper truth. He wasn't being raised. He was being prepared. But for what? The answer arrived unexpectedly one winter evening. Snow fell in thick, silent sheets outside the dining hall. Marcel sat alone at the long oak table finishing supper when the housekeeper approached carrying a sealed envelope. "This arrived for you," she said. "For me? Who sent it?" Her expression tightened. "No one knows. It was slipped under the gate." Marcel opened it cautiously. Inside was a single sheet of paper, handwritten, delicate, unmistakably feminine. The ink had blurred slightly, as though the writer's hand trembled. It read, "You are not forgotten. I have been searching for you since the day you were taken from me. Do not trust the Valmonts. E." Marcel's breath stopped. He read the letter again and again. Then he looked up, heart pounding, and saw, through the frost-covered window, a figure standing just beyond the garden lights. A woman, tall, wrapped in a dark coat, watching the manor. Before he could move, before he could cry out, the figure turned and disappeared into the snow. Marcel knew, without doubt, someone had found him, and someone else would stop at nothing to keep that from happening. The housekeeper's voice faded into the background as Marcel stared out into the snow-dusted gardens, searching for any trace of the figure who'd just vanished into the night. His pulse hammered like a drum against his ribs. For years he had lived with a void where his past should have been, and now, suddenly, the void was speaking. He clutched the letter again, feeling the tremor in his own hands. "I've been searching for you since the day you were taken from me. E." Marcel whispered the letter's final initial under his breath. E. He didn't know who she was, but deep inside something ancient, instinctual, whispered, "Mother." Before he could process the meaning, the dining hall lights flickered. The walls seemed to tighten around him. Rivenhall Manor was the kind of place where nothing happened by coincidence. A letter slipping under the gate was already dangerous, but a letter followed immediately by the sudden appearance of a shadow watching him. That was a message. Someone had breached the estate. Someone had bypassed the guards. Someone who knew exactly who Marcel was and where he was being held. He slipped the letter into his pocket just as the housekeeper returned, her voice unusually sharp. "Lord Rivenhall wishes to see you. At once." Marcel's stomach turned. In the manor, a summons from Rivenhall after nightfall was never good news. Rivenhall's study. The study was a cavern of old wealth. Leather-bound books, a marble fireplace, and maps of European duchies long erased from modern borders. Lord Rivenhall sat in a high-backed chair staring into the fire. The flames illuminated the deep lines etched into his face, carved by years of influence and ruthlessness. "Sit," he said without turning. Marcel obeyed. Rivenhall waited a full minute before speaking. When he finally addressed Marcel, his voice was ice sliding over stone. "We had an intruder tonight." Marcel's throat tightened. "I didn't see anyone." Rivenhall's gaze snapped toward him, sharp, probing, unblinking. "That's a lie." Marcel felt his pulse spike, but he kept his expression still. He had learned by now that fear was a currency in this house, one you gave sparingly, or not at all. The older man leaned forward. "She was here for you." "She?" Marcel repeated, feigning confusion. Rivenhall's mouth pressed into a thin line. "That woman has been a problem for decades. She should have learned by now that the past is dead." Marcel's fingers curled into fists beneath the table. "Who is she?" he asked softly. Rivenhall ignored the question. Instead, he rose to his feet, slowly, painfully, and limped toward a tall cabinet. When he opened it, Marcel glimpsed rows of neatly arranged boxes, each labelled with years and initials, secrets catalogued like museum artifacts. Rivenhall pulled out a small wooden box and placed it on the table. "Inside is the truth." Marcel opened it. At first glance, the box appeared empty, but beneath a false bottom he found a faded hospital bracelet, a birth date, a single initial, M, and a sealed document stamped with the Valmont crest, the swan with half-spread wings. Rivenhall spoke quietly. "You were born under unfortunate circumstances, but we saved you from a life of disgrace. The Valmonts protected you by ensuring the world never knew you existed." Marcel felt heat rising in his chest. "You didn't protect me," he said. "You hid me." Rivenhall's eyes glinted with something dangerous. "You're alive, aren't you? That is more than I can say for your father." The room tilted. Marcel's breath hitched. "My father?" Rivenhall tapped the cane against the floor, once, sharply. "Some truths are better buried." Marcel clenched his jaw. "Tell me." Rivenhall finally turned to face him fully. "Your father was a soldier. He overstepped his place. He tried to claim something, someone, that did not belong to him." Something cold threaded through Marcel's spine. "He was dealt with," Rivenhall finished quietly. A long silence flooded the room. Marcel's heart pounded. He didn't know the man's name. He didn't know the story. But he knew, with absolute certainty, what Rivenhall meant. His father had been killed. Not by accident. Not by circumstance. By design. Rivenhall tapped his cane again. "You must forget the woman you saw. Forget the letter she gave you. Forget everything she wants you to know." Marcel felt the letter burning in his pocket. "What if I don't?" he asked. Rivenhall's expression hardened into marble. "Then the Valmonts will do what they have always done. They will clean up the mistake." At that moment, Marcel realized the truth. He wasn't being raised. He wasn't being protected. He was being contained. And the moment he stopped cooperating, he would be erased just as easily as his father. Unless the woman in the snow could help him escape. Unless she was exactly who he thought she might be. Unless she was his mother. Marcel barely slept that night. He lay awake in his room beneath the slanted ceiling, watching the snowfall thicken against the window pane until the world outside was nothing but white silence. Rivenhall's words replayed in his mind, each one cutting deeper than the last. Your father was dealt with. You were born by mistake. Forget the woman. Forget her? Impossible. The letter felt like a pulse in his pocket. He must have read it 50 times before the sun rose. The handwriting was elegant, deliberate, not the writing of someone reckless, but someone who had waited years to say what she couldn't speak aloud. You are not forgotten. I have been searching for you. Do not trust the Valmonts. The last line echoed in his mind the longest. By dawn, Marcel realized something chilling. He was living in the house of the very man who had orchestrated his erasure. The same man who likely ensured his father's disappearance. The same man who believed Marcel should never have existed. The same man who would kill again, to keep the past buried. Something had to change. The second letter. 3 days passed. Marcel acted as normally as he could, pretending to focus on his private lessons, keeping his head lowered during meals, avoiding Rivenhall's gaze. But inside, he was watching, listening, waiting. On the evening of the third night, as he walked across the eastern hallway, he noticed a thin slip of folded paper wedged between the banister rails. His breath caught. He looked around. The corridor was empty. Hands trembling, he retrieved the note and unfolded it. This time the handwriting was smaller, hurried. "I cannot reach you again without being seen. Meet me at the old greenhouse at midnight. Come alone. E." Marcel's pulse raced. At midnight, the manor guards rotated shifts. Just 10 minutes of blind spots. 10 minutes when the outside world became reachable. But Rivenhall was no fool. He expected resistance, and the estate was built like a compound, with alarms on the outer gates and motion sensors in the gardens. It didn't matter. Marcel had to go. The greenhouse. The greenhouse sat at the far end of the property, a relic from the 1800s when a Valmont cousin had attempted to cultivate tropical plants in the northern frost. Now it was abandoned, half swallowed by vines and surrounded by silence. Marcel approached it just before midnight, moving through the shadows, breath fogging in the cold air. His hands shook, from fear or anticipation he couldn't tell. The greenhouse door creaked as he pushed it open. Inside, moonlight filtered through cracked glass panels, illuminating the skeletal remains of long-dead plants. A chill ran down his spine. "Hello?" he whispered. Nothing. Then, a soft movement behind a cluster of overgrown ivy. A woman stepped into the pale moonlight. Marcel froze. She wasn't young, though her posture was regal. Her hair was dark, streaked lightly with silver. Her coat was long, tailored, elegant but worn from years of use. Her eyes, clear grey, locked onto his face with a mixture of shock, fear, and something that could only be described as aching relief. "Marcel," she breathed. He didn't know how he knew, but he knew. "Are you—" His voice cracked. "Are you E?" She nodded. "And are you my—" He didn't finish the sentence. Tears welled in her eyes before she answered. "Yes, I am your mother." The greenhouse seemed to tilt around him. Years of emptiness, questions, and longing rumbled through his chest with violent force. "You're alive," he whispered. Her breath hitched. "I have waited so long to see you." He stepped closer. "Why did they take me? What did I do?" Her expression twisted in pain. "You existed," she said. That was enough. She reached forward, placing trembling hands on his shoulders, studying his face as though committing every feature to memory. "You look so much like him," she whispered. "My father?" Marcel asked. Her eyes glistened. "He loved you before he ever saw you, and they took him from us." A shadow crossed her face. Grief sharpened into something like steel. "They will do the same to you if you stay." Marcel swallowed hard. "Rivenhall won't let me leave." Evelyn stepped back, her voice suddenly urgent. "Listen to me. There is a reason they fear you. A reason the Valmonts erased your existence. You are not an accident. You are a threat. And if the truth about your birth comes out, it will change everything." Marcel's heart pounded. "What truth?" She opened her mouth to answer. A twig snapped outside. Both of them froze. A beam of light swept across the greenhouse glass. A flashlight. Voices followed. Guards. They had been found. Evelyn grabbed his arm. "Marcel, run!" He hesitated. "I can't leave you." "Yes, you can." Her grip tightened. "You must. The Valmonts are moving faster than I expected. They will kill us both if we stay." The greenhouse door began to rattle violently. "Marcel, go!" The glass shattered. Footsteps thundered in. Shouts filled the air. Marcel turned and sprinted into the night as Evelyn stepped forward to block the guards, placing herself between her son and the men who had hunted her for decades. Behind him, he heard her voice, the last clear word she spoke to him that night. "Find the truth. It's the only thing that will save you." Marcel didn't remember the first seconds of his escape, only the sound of shattering glass, Evelyn's voice echoing behind him, and the raw instinct that surged through his body, propelling him into the darkness. Snow crunched under his boots as he ran, deeper into the estate grounds, weaving between hedges and old stone statues. Behind him, flashlights slashed through the night like white blades. "There! He's running toward the east gate!" Marcel ducked behind a frost-covered fountain, chest heaving. Cold air burned his lungs. He peered through the stone cherubs and saw 3 guards scanning the grounds, weapons drawn, the kind that weren't meant for animal intruders or petty thieves. These men were hunting him. But where was Evelyn now? Had she been captured? Hurt? The thought sent a spike of panic through him, but he forced it down. Her last words still rang in his mind. Find the truth. It's the only thing that will save you. Truth wasn't in this manor. Truth wasn't in the monastery. Truth was somewhere the Valmonts didn't control. He had to reach it. The east wall Marcel crawled along the frozen ground, keeping low, moving through shadows cast by leafless trees. Light still swept across the landscape, but the guards were converging on the greenhouse, assuming he was cornered there. A mistake, one that might give him a chance. The east wall was the oldest section of the property. Vines had cracked the mortar years ago, creating footholds thick enough for a desperate escape. Marcel reached it, heart pounding, and grabbed hold of the ivy. Halfway up, a voice cut through the night. Stop! A spotlight pinned him. Guards were charging across the snow. Marcel scrambled upward, fingers numb. The stone bit into his palms. The ivy tore under his grip. A shot cracked through the air, not aimed to kill, but to warn. Then another. He pulled himself over the top of the wall and tumbled onto the other side, rolling down a small embankment before landing hard on frozen earth. Pain flared through his arm, but he was alive and free for the moment. He didn't wait. He rose and ran. Into the forest beyond Rivenhall Manor, the land dipped into a steep forest, dense, wild, and stretching for miles. A place where no flashlight could reach him, a place where the Valmont's influence thinned. Marcel plunged into the trees. Branches clawed at his coat. Roots threatened to trip him. Darkness pressed in from all sides. Somewhere in the distance he heard dogs barking, trackers unleashed. He pushed on. Snow muffled his footsteps, but also concealed hazards. Ditches, fallen logs, sudden drops. Once, he slipped on a slick patch and nearly rolled into a ravine. Only a protruding root saved him. After nearly an hour, the barking faded. The shouting dissolved. The forest swallowed him whole. He slowed, collapsing beside a dead tree trunk, chest aching, breath fogging. He didn't know how far he had travelled. He didn't know if Evelyn had escaped. He didn't even know where he was going. But he knew he couldn't stay. He pulled the letter from his pocket, the first one, and read it again by moonlight. I have been searching for you since the day you were taken from me. Do not trust the Valmonts. Evelyn was clearly alive. She clearly cared, and she clearly risked everything to contact him. Which meant she knew ways to hide from the Valmonts, ways to survive outside their control. Marcel needed to find her again. But how? He reached into his coat and removed the silver pendant the abbot had given him years ago, the Valmont sigil. He studied the swan with half-spread wings. Until tonight, it had been nothing but a mystery. But Evelyn's notes hinted at something deeper, something the Valmonts feared. What if the pendant wasn't just a symbol? What if it was a key? He pressed it between his palms as though the metal could give him answers. Then a sound cut through the quiet. Footsteps. Slow. Deliberate. Too heavy to be an animal. Marcel's blood froze. He ducked behind the tree trunk and peered into the darkness. A tall silhouette moved among the trees. A guard? A tracker? Someone else? No. This figure had no flashlight, no weapon drawn, no urgency. They walked like someone who knew exactly where Marcel was, and wasn't in a hurry. The stranger stopped near a cluster of dead thorns. Marcel's breath hitched as moonlight slid across his face. He recognized him. Lord Auguste Rivenhall. Somehow, impossibly, the old man had followed him. Rivenhall's voice drifted through the cold, steady and merciless. Marcel, you cannot run from blood. It always brings you home. Marcel's heart hammered. Rivenhall was alone. No guards, no dogs, no lights, just him. But that only made the moment more terrifying, because Rivenhall wasn't chasing him. He was shepherding him, like livestock being steered into a trap. Rivenhall took one step closer. You were never meant to survive tonight, but I am giving you one chance. Marcel said nothing. He didn't dare move. Come back to the manor, Rivenhall continued. It is the only place you're safe. Marcel clenched the pendant. No, he whispered. Rivenhall sighed, long, disappointed, ancient. So be it. He tapped his cane against the frozen ground once, a signal. From all around the forest, the sound of snapping branches exploded. Men emerging, boots crunching, dogs snarling. Marcel had only one escape path left, down the ravine. He braced himself, whispered a silent apology to Evelyn if he failed, and leapt into the darkness. Marcel didn't remember the fall itself, only the rush of freezing air and a violent impact that tore the breath from his lungs. Snow cushioned some of the drop, but the slope was steeper than he expected. He tumbled, rolled, hit a rock, slid further, until finally crashing against a cluster of thorn bushes that halted him with a jolt of pain. Above, dogs barked wildly at the ravine's edge. Men shouted orders, flashlights sweeping the cliff. But none of them followed. The ravine's drop was too dangerous. Even Rivenhall wouldn't send his men blindly into it. Marcel lay still, trembling, forcing himself to breathe quietly. His ribs burned. One elbow throbbed. But he was alive. He pushed himself up slowly, brushing snow from his face, and listened. Silence settled back over the forest. Then he heard it, faint but unmistakable. A bell, a single, distant chime floating through the trees like a memory. Not a church bell, not a farm bell, a monastery bell. His monastery. The place he had lived his entire life. The place Evelyn said he had been taken to. The place the abbot had lied to him about. Why was the bell ringing past midnight? He didn't know, but he knew one thing. He had to go back. The path. Backward Marcel trudged through the frost, clothes soaked, limbs heavy. The ravine funneled downward into a narrow path lined with ancient pines. Moonlight barely reached between their branches, giving the trail a bluish glow. Every sound, cracking twigs, rustling leaves, would set his nerves on edge. Rivenhall's words followed him like a curse. You were never meant to survive tonight. Blood always brings you home. What blood? What origin? What truth had been buried so violently that even Evelyn had to flee? Marcel tucked the pendant under his shirt, its cold metal pressed against his chest, a reminder that the answers were close, closer than ever. The hidden gate hours passed before he reached the back foothills of the monastery grounds. He approached cautiously, weaving between boulders and brush until the stone walls came into view. The monastery looked different at night. No warm candlelight from the chapel windows, no cloaked silhouettes moving across the courtyard, no quiet murmurs of monks in routine prayer. It was silent. Too silent. Marcel circled around the outer wall until he reached a small iron gate half buried by vines, a gate he had never seen open. Tonight, it was ajar. He froze. Someone had entered before him, or someone wanted him to enter. Either way, he slipped inside. Echoes of truth. The courtyard was deserted. Snow blanketed the gardens and cloisters. Marble statues stood like frozen sentinels. Even the dovecote was quiet. Marcel's breath fogged as he stepped toward the main chapel. The heavy oak door was cracked open, faint golden light spilling through. He pushed it slowly. The chapel smelled of incense, too strong, too fresh. Candles flickered along the aisle, illuminating wooden pews and embroidered tapestries. And then Marcel saw him, the abbot, kneeling before the altar but not in prayer. He was holding something, reading something, a letter. Marcel stepped inside. The abbot flinched, twisting around, his usually serene face contorted with shock, then fear. Marcel? His voice trembled. You shouldn't be here. Marcel's throat tightened. What did you do? The abbot stood shakily, clutching the letter to his chest. You don't understand. I tried to protect you. By lying? Marcel's voice rose, echoing across the stone walls. By telling me my mother was dead? By hiding her letters? The abbot closed his eyes. She begged me to keep you safe. From who? Marcel snapped. From the Valmonts? From Rivenhall? The abbot's eyes opened again, wet, tormented. No, he whispered. From your father. Marcel's breath stopped. His father. A ghost he had never known. A name never spoken. A truth buried deeper than Evelyn's escape or the monastery's walls. Who is he? Marcel croaked. The abbot hesitated, once, then slowly unrolled the letter and held it forward. Marcel stepped closer. It was never the Valmonts who wanted you hidden, the abbot whispered. It was the man searching for you now. Marcel's stomach dropped. The words felt like ice water sliding through his veins. What man? The abbot's eyes darted toward the doorway behind Marcel. Marcel turned. A silhouette stood in the chapel archway. Tall, immovable, waiting. Moonlight revealed his face, Lord August Rivenhall. Except his expression was not that of a hunter now. It was that of someone looking at family. The abbot collapsed to his knees. "Marcel, forgive me. I could not let him claim you." Rivenhall stepped forward, voice cold as the stones beneath their feet. "You were never meant to be a monk," he said softly. "You were meant to inherit everything." Marcel staggered backward. Rivenhall's face twisted into a grim smile. "After all," he whispered, "I am your father." For a moment, the entire chapel seemed to pulse like a living thing. The flickering candles, the trembling air, the pressure of a revelation too heavy for the walls to hold. Marcel felt the floor tilt beneath him. He reached for a pew to steady himself, breath shuddering, chest hammering with disbelief. Rivenhall, his father, the man who had hunted him through the forest, the man whose men had nearly killed him, the man Evelyn had feared her entire life. It couldn't be true. Yet the abbot's expression, a blend of shame, grief and relief, told him it was. Rivenhall took another step forward, boots echoing sharply on the ancient stone. "No matter how the abbot tried to hide you," he said, voice steady, "blood recognizes blood." Marcel's throat burned. "If you're my father, why did you try to kill me?" Rivenhall exhaled through his nose, calm, composed, terrifying in his certainty. "You mistake necessary intervention for murder. I needed you taken before they did." "They?" Marcel echoed. Rivenhall's eyes flicked toward the abbot. "Ask him. He's the one who kept you in a cage of sanctity for 22 years. The abbot flinched as though struck. "I kept him safe," he whispered. "You kept him weak," Rivenhall countered. He turned to Marcel with an expression almost softened, almost human. "You are the rightful heir to Valmont," he said. "The firstborn son of Evelyn Valmont and me." Marcel shook his head violently. "No, my mother, she loved someone else." A shadow crossed Rivenhall's face, not of anger but pain, deep, buried pain. "She loved a fantasy," he murmured. "A soldier boy who never understood the world she lived in. The Valmonts would never have allowed such a union. When she tried to run, I was the one who dragged her back to safety." The abbot rose unsteadily. "That's a lie," he spat, the most emotion Marcel had ever heard from him. "You forced her, you cornered her, you claimed her as if she were property." Rivenhall's face hardened. "Evelyn and I were bound by dynastic agreement. Her parents approved. Her bloodline required a man of my standing, not a penniless officer with romantic fantasies." Marcel felt sick. This was the truth behind Evelyn's terror. This was the shadow that chased her for decades. This was the man who destroyed her chance at happiness and took her child by force. "You took me from her," Marcel whispered. Rivenhall nodded once. "Yes, because she was unfit to protect you. She wanted to hide you from your birthright, to raise you as a fugitive, a bastard, nameless. I ensured you a place where the dynasty could observe you from a distance." The abbot's voice cracked. "You didn't place him. You abandoned him on these steps like a discarded secret." Rivenhall shrugged lightly. "He was safer here than with a mother who believed running could save him." Marcel's hands shook. "Then why come after me now?" Rivenhall's expression sharpened. "Because Evelyn broke our agreement." The abbot stiffened. Marcel frowned. "What agreement?" "That she would keep her distance from you," Rivenhall said. "That she would not interfere in your life. If she had stayed silent, you would have been left in peace here, living quietly, harmlessly. But she searched for you." He stepped closer, lowering his voice. "She found out too much." The words hung in the air like a noose. Marcel felt something inside him snap. "You killed my mother." Rivenhall didn't react. He simply looked at Marcel with the mild patience of a tutor correcting a child. "I did not." He paused. "But I allowed events to unfold as necessary." The abbot gasped. Marcel surged forward, pure rage. But Rivenhall raised a hand. "You think this is about personal cruelty? No. It is about survival. The Valmont line is collapsing. You're the only legitimate heir left." "I never asked to be—" "It doesn't matter what you asked," Rivenhall cut in. "This world is ancient. It devours weakness. And you, Marcel, you are the key to restoring a dynasty that has ruled for 8 centuries. Marcel stood frozen. Rivenhall's gaze bore into him, a mix of triumph and possession. You are my son, he said quietly. You cannot escape your blood. Then the doors of the chapel blew open with a violent crash, winter wind whipping in, candles dying in waves. A figure burst inside, hooded, breathless, carrying something wrapped in linen. The abbot staggered backward in shock. Rivenhall's face drained of colour. Marcel whispered, "Who?" The hood fell back, and Marcel felt the world shatter. "Marcel," the woman gasped, eyes wide with terror and love and urgency. It was his mother, Evelyn Valmont, alive. For several seconds Marcel could only stare, unable to breathe, speak, or move. Evelyn Valmont stood trembling in the archway, snow melting from her cloak, hair wind-tossed, eyes frantic with a desperation sharpened for 22 years. She was alive, despite the crash, despite the reports, despite Rivenhall. "Marcel," she whispered again, voice cracking. "My son, I've finally reached you." The abbot collapsed to a pew in stunned relief. Rivenhall stepped back, the first time Marcel had seen true fear flicker across the man's face. Evelyn strode forward, clutching the linen-wrapped object tighter to her chest. "You don't belong to him," she said, her voice trembling but resolute. "You never did." Rivenhall recovered his composure, but his voice came out brittle. "You should not be here, Evelyn. This is a mistake." "No," she hissed, "it was a mistake to ever trust you." A mother's return. Marcel's voice barely emerged. "I thought you died. The letters. The crash." Evelyn reached him, cupping his face in her hands, tears sliding down her cheeks. "They wanted you to believe I was dead," she said, "because it was the only way to keep you hidden long enough for the truth to surface." Rivenhall scoffed. Dramatic as always, the boy deserves facts, not sentimental delusions. Evelyn turned, eyes blazing. "Facts? Then let's give him the one you could never erase." She held up the object wrapped in linen. Carefully she peeled it open. Inside was a leather-bound journal, weathered, burned at the edges, salvaged from the night of the crash. "This," she said softly, "is your father's journal." Marcel frowned, shaking his head. He said he was my father." Evelyn's voice broke into a bitter, almost hysterical laugh. "Auguste, he's nothing but a tyrant with a title. You're not his son." Rivenhall's fists clenched. "Lies!" Evelyn ignored him. "Marcel, your father was Captain Marcus Leclerc." The name hit Marcel with a force that made his knees weaken. He clutched a pew to stay upright. "He loved you before he ever met you," Evelyn said. "We were going to escape together, leave the Valmonts, leave the blood-soaked politics behind. But Auguste discovered everything. Marcus never reached the border," she swallowed hard. "He was killed, silenced, and I was forced to swear you were stillborn." A tremor ran through Marcel's body. Every lie, every omission, every shadow in his upbringing now made brutal, perfect sense. Rivenhall stepped closer, voice low with menace. "You think he will believe that romantic nonsense? You think he will choose a dead soldier over the dynasty that runs in his veins?" Evelyn whirled on him. "You forged the documents. You paid the archivists. You bribed the midwives. You rewrote his lineage to serve your ambitions." Rivenhall's expression turned ice cold. "I did what was required." The real heir Marcel lifted the journal with trembling hands. Its cover bore a single emblem, a silver falcon. "The seal of House Leclerc," the abbot whispered. "A house wiped out in the Bavarian fire." Evelyn nodded. The fire was no accident. Auguste wanted their land, their military contracts, and Marcus was the last surviving Leclerc. Our union threatened everything. She turned to Marcel, voice soft again. "You are not a pawn of Valmont or Rivenhall. You are the last Leclerc heir." Rivenhall lunged forward, voice booming. "And that is exactly why you can't let him leave this place." Marcel flinched. Evelyn stepped protectively in front of him. Rivenhall's command cracked like a whip. "Guards!" Nothing happened. The monastery stayed silent. Rivenhall's eye twitched. He called again. "Guards!" Still, nothing. The abbot rose slowly, gripping his staff. "This is sacred ground," he said. "No armed men cross the threshold of this chapel." Rivenhall's expression twisted with rage and humiliation. You fools think you can stop a dynasty? You think you can hide the boy from the world he is destined to lead?" Evelyn looked at Marcel, voice trembling with urgency. "You must choose, Marcel, right now." His breath hitched. "Choose what?" She took his hands. "Whether you want to be Valmont's puppet," her voice broke, "or Leclerc's rightful heir." Rivenhall stepped forward one final time, voice like thunder. "Choose carefully, because whichever path you take, I will shape it." Marcel's pulse roared in his ears as both sides, blood and truth, closed in around him. For the first time in his life, everyone wanted something from him. Everyone except the one person he trusted most, himself. The chapel felt too small for the decision laid before him. Centuries of carved stone, painted saints, and flickering candles seemed to lean inward as if the monastery itself held its breath, waiting for Marcel's choice. Evelyn's hand clutched his, trembling yet determined. Rivenhall stood a few paces away, posture rigid, eyes burning with a fierce, calculated hunger. The abbot whispered silent prayers under his breath. Marcel felt the world narrowing into a single, suffocating moment. "I don't want a dynasty," he muttered. "I never asked for any of this." Rivenhall stepped closer, voice suddenly soft, dangerously persuasive. "No child asks for destiny, but you were born into one. You can reject me, but you cannot reject the blood that anchors you to a lineage older than kingdoms. You are Valmont." "He is Leclerc," Evelyn interrupted, her voice shaking with fury. "And you know it." Rivenhall ignored her, eyes piercing into Marcel. "You can inherit more power than any forgotten soldier could ever imagine. As my son—" "I'm not your son," Marcel snapped, his voice cracking. The words echoed like a crack of thunder. Evelyn pressed a hand to her heart, tears slipping free. Rivenhall's expression flickered with something dark. Not sorrow, but insult. "Then answer this," Rivenhall said slowly. "Why do you think the Valmonts let you live? Why do you think they didn't dispose of you like they did with so many other inconveniences?" Marcel froze. Rivenhall smiled without warmth. "Because they believed you were mine. That alone granted you protection." The abbot stiffened. Evelyn's jaw clenched. Rivenhall continued, "Your mother may cling to her fantasies, but dynastic archives record what matters. The blood tests—" "No," Evelyn sharply interrupted. "Those tests were forged. By you. Because you needed the Valmonts to believe the child was yours, so they wouldn't expose your methods." "Methods?" Marcel asked hoarsely. Evelyn inhaled, shakily. "When I refused Auguste, he took what he wanted. A man like him never accepts no." A silence colder than the winter wind filled the chapel. The abbot moved closer to Marcel, voice gentle. "Son, the journal you hold, it was Marcus's last proof. He knew she was carrying his child. He wrote about the plans to escape. He wrote your name." Marcel's head jerked up. "My name?" Evelyn nodded, tears shining. "He chose it, Marcel, after his grandfather." Rivenhall's face darkened like a storm front. "That journal means nothing. Fantasies of a disgraced officer. None of it changes the fact that the Valmont Council still recognizes you as my successor." Marcel turned to Evelyn. "Why now?" he whispered. "Why didn't you come for me sooner?" Her face crumpled. "I tried," she whispered. "Every year. But Auguste had watchers everywhere. Cars followed me, phones tapped, letters intercepted. If I got too close to the monastery, they would have moved you, maybe killed you." She squeezed his hands tight. "But when the council discovered the truth of your parentage, when they realized you were not Rivenhall's son, they ordered your removal." Her voice broke. "They planned to erase you." Marcel felt cold all over. Rivenhall's silence confirmed everything. The abbot nodded slowly. "We received anonymous warnings. That is why I locked away Evelyn's letters, why I hid your records. I feared if you knew too soon you would run, and they would catch you unprepared." Marcel staggered back, heart twisting. "So everyone lied to me," he whispered, "for different reasons." Evelyn stepped forward, voice trembling. "But I am done lying. You deserve the truth, even if it destroys everything the nobility has built." Rivenhall's voice sliced through the moment. "You think truth will save him? It will sign his death warrant. The council already voted. Without Valmont blood, he is a threat. Exposed. Unprotected." He pointed at Marcel. And the day the world learns he is Leclerc's heir, every noble house that feared Marcus will come hunting to finish the bloodline once and for all. Evelyn turned pale. The abbot crossed himself. Marcel felt dizzy. So what do I do? Rivenhall answered instantly. You claim your Valmont heritage. Evelyn answered just as quickly. You choose freedom. You choose Leclerc. Marcel shut his eyes. For a moment, only the howl of the wind echoed through the chapel doors. Then, a distant metallic clatter, boots striking stone, men shouting orders. Rivenhall's eyes widened in triumph. They're here! Evelyn grabbed Marcel's arm, eyes wild with fear. You have seconds to choose. The chapel doors shook violently as armed men began forcing their way inside, and Marcel faced the single decision that would determine whether he lived, died, or vanished into history as another royal secret buried in silence. The pounding on the chapel doors became violent, splintering wood, rattling hinges. Dust drifted from the vaulted ceiling as centuries-old stone trembled beneath the force. Marcel felt the moment closing around him like a trap. Evelyn pulled him behind her, voice shaking. We have to escape. Now. There's a passage beneath the chapel. Your father found it decades ago. Marcus planned to use it when we fled. Rivenhall stepped into their path. You're not taking him anywhere. The abbot raised his staff. You do not command this house, Lord Rivenhall. Rivenhall's expression sharpened into a predatory smile. I don't need to. The Valmont Council does. Another blow crashed against the doors, this time with the metallic scrape of a battering ram. The hinges screamed. Marcel's heartbeat roared in his ears. He looked at Evelyn, her terrified blue eyes so much like his own. He looked at the abbot, trembling but resolute. He looked at Rivenhall, a man carved from ambition and cruelty. He felt pulled in 3 directions, each promising salvation at a cost he couldn't yet see. Marcel, Evelyn whispered urgently, once they breach those doors, your choice is gone. Rivenhall's voice sliced through her plea. Choose Valmont and you live with protection, wealth, and the future your blood deserves. Choose her fantasy and you die before dawn. Evelyn turned on Rivenhall with a fury Marcel had never imagined in her. You do not get to decide his fate ever again. The ram hit the doors once more. Boom! Splitting one of the thick wooden planks. A gloved hand appeared through the gap. The abbot gasped. We have perhaps 30 seconds. Evelyn seized Marcel's wrist. Listen to me. The tunnel leads into the forest and ends at an old hunting cabin. Marcus hid documents there. Proof of your lineage. Enough to expose everything Rivenhall has done. Rivenhall took a step forward. And with those documents, Valmont will hunt you across every border. They will not allow a Leclerc heir to challenge them. You'll be dead within the week. Evelyn turned to Marcel, tears slipping down her cheeks. It's your choice, my love. Marcel's breath came fast and unsteady. Every truth tonight had shattered him. Every lie had shaped him. And now his next words would decide not just his fate, but the fate of 2 dynasties. The doors exploded inward. A dozen armed men flooded the chapel. Black coats, polished firearms, visors hiding their eyes. Their formation was military, precise, unquestionably trained for one purpose. The Valmont sentinels. Stand down, the commander barked. Rivenhall lifted his chin with smug authority. He is under the council's protection. No one leaves. The sentinels aimed their rifles at Evelyn and the abbot. Marcel nearly lunged forward, but Evelyn grabbed him, pressing him back behind a pillar. Marcel, she whispered urgently, your father wrote everything in his journal. Enough to destroy the Valmonts, enough to free you. The abbot stepped forward, placing himself between the rifles and Evelyn, voice resonating despite his frailty. This chapel is holy ground. You have no right. A shot cracked through the air. It struck the stone near the abbot's head, sending shards across the floor. He stumbled, stunned. Next shot won't miss, the commander warned. Rivenhall's voice was smooth as silk. Take the boy. Evelyn cried out and pulled Marcel backward, toward a recess behind the altar. Run, she whispered fiercely. Run now. Rivenhall lunged, but Marcel dodged past the pews, heart pounding, the soldiers closing in from both sides. Evelyn shoved a heavy candle stand into their path, buying mere seconds. Marcel, she shouted, the tunnel! He sprinted for the altar, but before he reached it, a sentinel blocked his path, raising his rifle. Marcel froze. The soldier's visor reflected his face, pale, breathless, trapped. Rivenhall stepped behind the sentinel, victorious. "It's over. The Valmont line will not fracture because of a frightened monk." Something inside Marcel snapped. He wasn't a monk. He wasn't a Valmont puppet. He wasn't Rivenhall's property. And he wasn't going to die on the stone floor of a chapel without fighting for his life. With a surge of desperation, Marcel reached inside his coat and pulled out Marcus Leclerc's journal. For a split second, he considered using it as a shield, absurd, then a weapon, impossible, then something else, a bargaining chip. He held it high. "Touch me," Marcel shouted, voice ringing across the chamber, "and the world will learn everything!" Everyone froze, even the sentinels hesitated. Rivenhall's eyes widened, not in fear, but in fury. "You wouldn't dare!" Marcel's voice hardened. "I would, and I will." Evelyn's eyes filled with hope. The abbot whispered a prayer of thanks. Rivenhall's expression twisted. "You don't understand the forces you're provoking." "I understand enough," Marcel said. "Enough to know you're terrified." A long, tense moment followed. Then, behind the altar, Evelyn kicked open a stone panel with a hollow thud. Dust billowed outward. The tunnel. Rivenhall's eyes snapped to it. "Stop him!" But Marcel was already running. Evelyn grabbed his sleeve. The abbot stumbled after them. Marcel dove into the dark passage just as gunfire erupted, bullets tearing splinters from the altar. The stone panel slammed shut behind them. The last sound Marcel heard was Rivenhall's enraged roar. "He will not escape me!" Then the tunnel swallowed them in darkness. The tunnel swallowed them whole, a narrow throat of stone descending into darkness, damp with centuries of trapped air. Marcel's breath came in ragged bursts as he followed Evelyn down the steep incline, one hand. Against the cold wall, the other clutching Marcus's journal like a lifeline. Behind them, the muffled echoes of shouts, boots, and ricocheting gunfire vibrated through the stones. The Valmont sentinels were trying to find the hidden entrance. They wouldn't stay confused for long. "Stay low," Evelyn whispered, pulling him deeper. "Marcus and I mapped this tunnel before everything happened. It leads under the eastern forest." The abbot, panting heavily behind them, tried to speak. "You two, go ahead. I will slow them." "No," Marcel snapped, grabbing his arm. "We stay together." Evelyn squeezed Marcel's shoulder, proud but terrified. The passage turned sharply, revealing a wider cavern. A faint glow shimmered from bioluminescent moss along the walls, ghostly green veins pulsing like a heartbeat beneath the earth. Marcel stared at it, unable to shake the feeling that the tunnel itself remembered every secret it had ever carried. "How long does this go?" he asked. "Almost a mile," Evelyn said. "But once we reach the shaft, we climb to the surface. From there, the cabin is another hour north." A thunderous crash echoed from behind. The sentinels had breached the chapel altar. The hunt had resumed. The tunnel of the exiled. As they moved, Evelyn's voice grew steadier, more resolute. "There's something you need to know, Marcel. The tunnel wasn't built for us. It was constructed in 1711, when the Valmonts purged dissenters from the region. Anyone who tried to expose the dynasty's corruption was smuggled out through this passage." She touched the wall, fingers tracing ancient chisel marks. "My great-grandmother called it the Passage of the Exiled." Marcel ran his hand across the stone. So many had fled these same walls, so many silenced lives, and now he was just another name in that long-buried lineage of fugitives. "We're almost there," Evelyn whispered, but something in her tone made Marcel look closer. Her breath was uneven, her steps faltered. Her free hand pressed against her ribs. "You're hurt," Marcel said. "I'll manage." But the abbot placed a solemn hand on her shoulder. "No lies, Evelyn. Not now." She closed her eyes, a momentary surrender, then lifted her cloak. Marcel's stomach dropped. Blood. Dark. Blooming across her side from a bullet graze, or worse. "Mother, it's nothing," she insisted. "A splinter from the altar, I'm fine." "Splinters don't bleed like that," Marcel said, voice trembling. "You're wounded. Badly." Evelyn cupped his face with cold fingers. "I didn't come back from the dead for you to stop now," her eyes sharpened. "You carry Marcus's name, you carry his truth, and you will survive this." The abbot murmured a prayer under his breath. Marcel swallowed the rising panic. The sentinels were close. They had no time. "Lean on me," he said. Evelyn nodded, though her breath shuddered with pain. The shaft minutes felt like hours before they reached the vertical shaft, a cylindrical well stretching upward, faint moonlight shimmering at the top. Evelyn collapsed against the wall, pale. The abbot looked upward. The old winch is still here. We can climb. Marcel tied the rope around Evelyn first. I'll pull you up, he said. No, she whispered, gripping his hand. You go first. Not without you. Her voice softened. You must reach Marcus's cabin. The documents, they will protect you. They will expose Rivenhall. If they catch you before you have them, everything collapses. Another echo rolled through the tunnel. Boots on stone. They were close. The abbot's voice trembled. Marcel, she's right. Marcel turned to Evelyn, eyes burning. Then you climb with me. Evelyn tried to speak, but a sudden sound froze all three of them. A metallic clink, then another. Then a flashlight beam stabbed through the darkness at the far end of the tunnel. Sentinels! Go! Evelyn screamed. Marcel grabbed the rope and started climbing, pulling hand over hand, boots slipping against stone. He reached back down. Mother, grab the rope! The abbot lifted Evelyn, tying the rope around her waist. But as Marcel pulled, a gunshot cracked through the tunnel. Evelyn cried out, collapsing to her knees. No! Marcel screamed, trying to slide back down the rope. The abbot shoved her upward desperately. Climb, Evelyn, climb! The rope jerked. She was climbing, but slowly, painfully. Below, the sentinels shouted orders. Shoot the rope! Take the mother alive! Another gunshot. Stone shattered inches from Evelyn's hand. Marcel pulled harder, ignoring the burn in his palms. Mother, come on! But then, suddenly, the rope went slack. The abbot cried out. Marcel looked down. The sentinels had reached them. The abbot struggled against two soldiers. Evelyn was being dragged away, screaming Marcel's name. Run! She shouted. Run to the cabin! Don't let him win! Marcel reached desperately for her, but she was torn from the shaft as Rivenhall himself stepped into view, eyes blazing with triumph. I told you, he shouted into the shaft. You cannot escape your blood, Evelyn screamed. The abbot fell. The sentinels swarmed. Marcel climbed the last few feet, bursting out into freezing moonlit air, collapsing onto the forest floor. His tears steamed in the cold. Below him, buried under stone and darkness, his mother's screams were swallowed by gunfire. Marcel staggered to his feet. Rivenhall had taken everything. Everything but one thing. Marcel still had the journal and the truth, and now he would use it, no matter the cost. The forest was silent, too silent. Not the stillness of nature, but the vacuum that follows horror. Marcel ran until his lungs tore at the cold, until branches carved lines across his arms and face. Every sound behind him felt like an echo of the screams he couldn't unhear. Evelyn, the abbot, dragged back into the darkness he'd just escaped. The moon clung to the clouds like a dying lantern, giving him only scraps of light as he sprinted through the undergrowth. He kept one hand pressed to his chest, clutching Marcus's journal beneath his coat. It felt heavier now, heavier than a book, heavier than a lifetime. It felt like a final command. The forest of lost voices. The forest surrounding the old Valmont territories had always been rumoured to carry the voices of the dead. Whispers caught between wind and bark, stories that refused to stay buried. Tonight Marcel heard them all. Every rustle felt like a warning. Every crack of a branch felt like a footstep behind him. Every breath of wind carried his mother's last word, run. He stumbled through the thicket, climbing over fallen trees slick with frost. More than once he fell, but the image of Rivenhall grabbing Evelyn by the hair forced him back onto his feet. The man hadn't aged, not in the ways that mattered. His cruelty was as sharp as it had been the night Marcus died. Marcel wiped his eyes with the back of a shaking hand and pressed on. The cabin was still an hour north, but the sentinels wouldn't wait that long. The watcher in the pines. By the time the forest thinned enough to reveal the northern ridge, Marcel's legs trembled, and his breath formed thick plumes in the air. Moonlight drizzled through the skeletal branches overhead, illuminating a narrow deer path snaking toward the mountains. He slowed, listened. Nothing. He knelt, pulling the journal from his coat. The leather was cracked with age, edges curled from years of the use. Marcus's handwriting was everywhere, bold, frantic, determined. Marcel flipped to the final marked page. A crude map, the cabin, the cellar, the second lock, and beneath Marcus's final set of coordinates. If Evelyn cannot protect you, then truth must. Marcel's throat tightened. Marcus had known. He had prepared for this. His father had foreseen the day when Marcel would stand alone, hunted by the same monster who had hunted him. But the map was incomplete, missing the last direction. North 5 miles, then east, Marcel whispered. East, how far? A twig snapped behind him. He spun, heart slamming into his ribs. A figure stood between the trees, tall, still, cloaked, sentinel, hunter, Rivenhall himself. The figure stepped forward, a glint, metal-catching moonlight. Marcel bolted. The river divide branches tore at him as he burst through the ridge and slid down a steep slope, boots skidding over loose earth. Ahead, the forest broke open into a rushing river, wide and furious with winter melt. He didn't stop. The figure behind him crashed through the trees, faster now. Marcel hit the riverbank, cold mist spraying his face. He looked at the water. Dark, deep, deadly. He looked back. The figure emerged at the tree line. No mask, no uniform, a woman. Her expression unreadable beneath the shadows of her hood. Marcel Valmont, she called, voice carrying easily over the roar of the river. Stop running. He froze, not because she spoke his name, not because she'd caught up, but because he knew that voice. He had heard it in Marcus's old investigation tapes, in the background of every meeting, every argument, every warning. His father's most trusted partner, Detective Sarah Quinn, missing for 12 years, presumed dead. Impossible, Marcel whispered. She stepped closer. Your father didn't die because he was careless. He died because he trusted the wrong person. Marcel's blood ran cold. Quinn reached into her coat. Marcel flinched, but instead of a weapon, she pulled out a second journal, identical to Marcus's. She tossed it at his feet. Your father kept 2, she said. 1 for you, 1 for me. Marcel looked down at the journal, stunned. Quinn lifted her hood. Her face was lined with scars, one eye clouded white. I've been waiting for you, she said, ever since Marcus's last message. Marcel's voice cracked. Then help me, they have my mother. Quinn's expression didn't change. Evelyn is already gone. Marcel staggered backward as if struck. Quinn continued, colder now. You cannot save the dead, but you can finish what your parents died for. She pointed across the river. The cabin is on the other side. If you want to destroy Rivenhall, it starts tonight. Marcel clenched his fists. He looked at the river, then at the journal, then at the woman who might be ally or executioner. Finally he whispered, Show me. Quinn nodded once. Follow me, Marcel, and don't look back. Together they crossed into the darkness, where the truth waited. The river swallowed their footsteps the moment they crossed to the opposite bank, carrying away any trace of pursuit. Marcel's legs trembled as he climbed the far embankment, soaked to the waist, lungs burning from the cold. Quinn moved ahead with predatory precision, barely winded, her silhouette cutting through the mist like a blade. The forest here was different, quieter, older, as if the trees themselves remembered what the Valmonts had buried beneath their roots. Marcel clutched Marcus's journal to his chest, each step fueled not by strength but by the growing fire in his veins. Evelyn's last cry still echoed in his skull. The look in Rivenhall's eyes, rage mixed with triumph, burned hotter than the icy wind. Tell me everything, Marcel said through chattering teeth. Tell me what really happened to my father. Quinn didn't slow. You already know how he died, she said, but you do not know why. Marcel stumbled to her side. Then tell me why. She exhaled hard, a plume of frost drifting from her lips. Your father discovered the Valmont succession fraud. He learned you weren't. Rivenhall's. That Evelyn had carried Marcus's child, her voice darkened. And he learned what Rivenhall planned to do once the council learned the truth. Marcel swallowed. Kill me. No, Quinn turned to him, her eyes gleaming like steel. Use you. A branch snapped in the silence. What do you mean? Quinn continued walking. The Valmonts never wanted to erase your bloodline. They wanted to rewrite it, present you as Rivenhall's heir, groom you, control you, install you as a monarch in waiting, one they owned. Marcel felt the ground tilt. "A puppet," he whispered. "A weapon," Quinn corrected. "A unifying symbol for the old nobility. A figurehead to restore dynastic power in Europe. Rivenhall's dream was a return to the centuries when nobles ruled from the shadows." Marcel's breath caught. "And my father stopped him?" Quinn nodded once. He almost succeeded. Marcus delivered his findings to an independent tribunal. The evidence was explosive, enough to dismantle the Valmonts entirely. "What happened to it?" Marcel demanded. Quinn stopped walking. She turned to him slowly. "That," she said, "is why we're here." Ahead, through the pines, a faint shape emerged, half buried in darkness. A cabin, small, silent, forgotten. Marcel stared. It was exactly as Marcus had drawn it. Quinn motioned for silence and approached carefully. She circled the cabin twice, checking windows, foundation stones, the roofline. Finally she nodded. No signs of disturbance. If anyone has been here, it wasn't recent. Marcel stepped forward, heart pounding. The door creaked open with a groan that echoed through the trees. Inside, dust coated everything in a thick, unbroken layer. The air smelled of damp wood and old secrets. Marcus's handwriting greeted them instantly. Symbols, numbers, coordinates, carved into the wall beams. Quinn pointed to the centre room. "There." Marcel knelt on the wooden floor. Beneath a loose board, exactly where the journal indicated, lay a metal lockbox, rusted, heavy, and marked with an insignia he had seen only in the deepest pages of the journal. The Valmont crest, crossed swords over a hollow crown. His hands shook as he lifted it free. "Open it," Quinn said quietly. Marcel turned the key he'd been given by the abbot, a key he now realised Marcus had left behind intentionally. The lock clicked. The lid opened. Inside sat a neatly packed set of sealed envelopes, a small recorder, and a folded document bearing Marcus's signature. Marcel lifted the document first. His father's handwriting leapt off the page, bold, furious, controlled. Proof of succession fraud. Names of bribed officials, coerced DNA labs, covert surveillance orders on Evelyn, the directive to eliminate her child if exposed. Marcel's stomach twisted. The last page held only one line. "If you are reading this, Marcel, it means I failed, but you won't." His vision blurred. Quinn crouched beside him. "That evidence can burn the Valmonts to ash, Rivenhall included, but you must choose what happens next." Marcel wiped his face with trembling hands. "What choices do I have?" Quinn held up 2 fingers. "One," she said. "You release this evidence publicly. The nobility collapses, the old guard fractures, but you become the target of every surviving family. They will hunt you until the end of your life." Marcel inhaled sharply. "And 2? 2, Quinn said slowly. "You use the evidence to take control. You assume the role they wanted for you, but on your terms, you become their heir, their leader, their nightmare." Marcel froze. A monarch made by truth rather than blood. A king forged in fire. A ghost child risen from a conspiracy. His pulse hammered. "You mean, I become the thing my father died fighting?" "No," Quinn said softly. "You become the thing he never had the chance to be. A leader with the power to end them all from the inside." Marcel stared at the box, at the truth, at the lives destroyed to protect it. His mother's face flickered in his mind. Marcus's voice whispered from memory. Rivenhall's threat echoed like poison. Finally Marcel whispered, "I choose." A gunshot shattered the air. The cabin wall exploded behind Quinn, wood splintering into the room. She grabbed Marcel, dragging him to the floor. A second shot ripped through the window. Quinn hissed through clenched teeth. "They found us." Through the broken window, Marcel saw movement. Black uniforms, rifles raised. The sentinels. Rivenhall's voice boomed through the forest. "Marcel, bring me the box and I will spare you." Quinn shoved the evidence into Marcel's hands. "Run," she rasped. "Finish it." Marcel hesitated, only for a heartbeat. Then he grabbed the second journal, the recorder, the documents, and bolted through the back door into the night. Gunfire chased him. Branches ripped at his clothes. The box slammed against his chest with every stride. He didn't look back, not when the cabin lit with muzzle flashes, not when Quinn screamed his name, not when the forest swallowed her voice whole. He ran until the world blurred, until dawn broke over the ridge, until the path split into two trails, one toward the cities, the media, the truth, the other toward the Valmont estate, the throne, the crown. Marcel stopped at the crossroads, chest heaving, eyes burning. The box of secrets pulsed with possibility. 2 futures, 2 wars, no turning back. He closed his eyes, chose his path, and stepped forward.